Okay, there's a separate one on the PDF.
All right, so while we figure this out, I thought instead of giving you a product pitch, which I'm sure you're all dying to hear all about Cloudband, as well you should, to tell you a little bit about what we're seeing in the industry, because we're reaching the top of the hype. I couldn't agree more with Don, and by the way, really congratulations on the work on galvanizing the industry and on founding this body, which, a year ago nobody knew what we were talking about in Cloudband. We used to call it virtual telco and try to explain moving stuff to the cloud. It took us about 2 hours to do it. Now the whole industry is there. And it happened so quickly, right? It happened so quickly that now we're entering a huge, huge hype cycle. I'm pretty sure that by Mobile World Congress, we're going to see the soda machines advertised as NFV. I mean, they're multi-tenant. You have different flavors of Coke. They probably have some connection for credit cards, so they're SDN enabled, right? So we're at the height of the hype. I want to share with you from working with some of people in the industry where we think the industry actually is and what we're feeling out there. So we're seeing customers actually and service providers split into three. Based on the work of the ISG in the first white paper, now every single large customer in the world has an opinion on NFV. It wasn't the case a year ago. There were 4 or 5 people that were talking about this, okay? And I would split them on this chart, basically either just exploring and thinking what it means to them, what is their strategy, what should they do. They might be experimenting a little bit, which means now there's already an NFV team, usually in the research group or the CTO group, not so much in the networks group. They might be releasing some RFIs and doing some labs and experimentation. And very few are at the stage of executing, which I would say that's where the baton moves to the networking guys. And that's where the operational people are very much involved. And that's where instead of trying to prove something in a lab to see if it makes sense, you actually talk about deployments and field trials and hitting the market. And we're seeing very, very fast move on that, but I think most operators this year started on the left and are somewhere in the middle. But by the way, next year, I have no doubt, in 2014, we're going to see a few examples of people already executing in the network. Sure, maybe in a few metros, maybe not across everything, definitely on a few workloads and not on everything, but we are going to see the first implementations in the field, which really wouldn't have happened if the industry wouldn't have galvanized together. Some of you might have seen this before. It's not too different from the use cases that Don showed and the NFV guys showed. The difference here, these are all projects that we're involved with ourselves, and I can tell you that there's 3 different types that we're seeing. To my surprise, data plane became very real very fast. I was absolutely sure that we're going to do control plane type applications and single appliances in the beginning. It's not the case. And we have significant operator willingness to play around with data plane, mainly because the benefits of NFV happen when you have a lot of tenants on top of the multi-tenant infrastructure. And when you do the math, unless you get all the way to the edge, you're not really going to make a dent in the operations. But I definitely really like the stuff on the left. Those simple appliances, DNS, DHCP, firewalls, load balancers. This is just a partial list. We're doing even more than those that are here. Those are more concrete. We're seeing carriers think of just end of life. Hey, I have a DNS. It's going to die. Should I replace it with another batch of hundreds of dedicated Sun Solaris servers, or should I stick it on the cloud? And those are excellent discussions. We, by the way, automate all of that in the platform, so the application gets auto-deployed, auto-healed, auto-scaled. And then it's pretty easy, right? If there's a failure, did the application receive the SLA from the infrastructure? If not, it's my fault. If it did and the application crashed, it's the application's fault, right? Just like in the IT space, except there's tighter interlock and a lot of automation around that. So that is a clear step. And that means the operations teams need to change. There needs to be somebody that owns the infrastructure. There needs to be somebody that owns the apps. There needs to be a dialogue between them. There needs to be SLAs involved. And that is one very big change that we're even implementing in the systems itself. So you log into a cloud management system with a different role. You have different views. You're allowed to do different things. I mentioned automation. Automation is by far the most important thing because let's not fool ourselves. We're doing this to save money. I know it's cool, it's really sexy, and cloud and big data and SDN is really, really great, but we're doing this to save money. And you won't save money if what you need now are teams of professional services to make any little change. if you need now to have the storage expert and the hardware expert and this expert and that expert all coming together, if you want a new virtual machine and you need to call the networking guy to plug it together, everything needs to be automated, everything. It means the data center itself gets installed automatically without professional services and hundreds of thousands of dollars and 9 months of a project. It's just done, right, in 2 hours. Okay? It means that if there's a failure in the hardware, you recover from it automatically. If you want to add more capacity, you plug it in, the system auto-discovers it. It means that managing all these different sites is done automatically. Business rules on affinity, putting things together, putting them separately, done automatically. The application lifecycle, healing, scaling, deploying, upgrades, done automatically. Right? Then you save money. And if you also use cheap equipment and use open source, you save even more. Right? And that is starting to be understood, not fully. I still see too much discussion, in my view, on performance of an app using SRIOV or not, which is great. We work very closely with Intel on those stuff. They're really, really helping to move the industry. But I think we need to measure ourselves on, are the decisions we make, are they a step function improvement, significant improvement, right? Not 10%, 90%. Do we really save money? Do we simplify the process? Do we reduce complexity? Do we add agility? And of course, multi-tenancy is its own issue with noisy neighbors and so on that we're starting to feel pretty heavily. But luckily, there are great tricks from the cloud industry to solve that. And that kind of leads me to this point. I think what I'm very happy to see the ISG, NTNFV group do is not to define a standard, but to look at the cloud industry, to look at the IT industry, to understand that this is not the same for many reasons. Some of them are listed here, but that we can look into those, we can try to influence those, not by a telco standard, but by contributing to OpenStack, by talking to those guys, by pushing them and showing them that there's a big market and it makes sense if you add these features, we will consume it, by contributing code in open source projects, God forbid. Right? That's what we need to do, right? And I'm very, very happy to see that clear statement. I think I'm still seeing a lot, mainly from the mobile operators that are so used to having a 3GPP standard that explains X, that they need to see a standard. They have to see a standard before they move into production. There's not going to be a standard in NFV, right? Not going to be a standard, and I'm really happy to see that the operators are getting together saying the same thing. We can point to other activity. We're big enough to radically shape those other activities if we do it together. But there won't be a 3GPP interface for how you configure virtual machines. Right? And even if there would be, and we'll sit together and try to code it for 2 years and then agree to it, by the time we do so, we'll do, I don't know, OpenStack Folsom, and by then it's whatever's after Havana, and it just won't work. So that is something we really need help on. I still see many of the operators not fully embracing this and still worried about, okay, this is great, but show me the standard. How will I ensure, you talked about multi-vendor. How will I ensure multi-vendor happens if there's no standard? Well, there is a standard, right? It's called OpenStack, it's called KVM, it's called Linux. You know, it's just different. I mentioned some of these points. These are the principles we try to implement in CloudBand. I spoke a lot about automation, so I won't mention that. Getting automation or a converged data center all the way down to the COs, crucially important. Dimensioning that starts being really interesting. I think what we find is actually it's not one size fits all. We're actually seeing even the data centers getting fine-tuned. Fine-tuned doesn't mean proprietary. It doesn't mean that you use custom ASICs. It doesn't mean that you do anything special or lock into any vendor. It means that when you have good understanding of the workload, you can start making the right decisions to optimize performance and to reduce costs. Like if I'm going to do a CDN, I might need more storage. And I might want to write directly to some disks or use some SSDs to improve performance of the storage. And if I'm doing data plane, maybe I need more RAM and more CPU, but a lot less storage. So if I can think those things through, I can build the right infrastructure that still a data plane application can run on a site that's more optimized for CDN, so it's still multi-tenant. But if I have a good plan and understand my workloads better, then I can get more efficient use of resources and then have a management and orchestration system that allocates that appropriately. SDN, we're finding that to be crucial. We didn't think so in the beginning. Okay, we were fine with VLANs until we started really talking about distribution. And the big thing is, if you move a workload around from site A to site B, and you need to reconstruct the network all over again, it is complicated. And for me, the easiest thing with SDN is the network moves with the VM, right? Not to mention interconnectivity between sites. So personally, we felt SDN will take 1 or 2 years before we really need to address it in NFV. We've completely changed that. We're doing it now. We're doing it now. We're trialing it with a few customers now. It will be commercial at the end of the year. It's just, again, why not automate the network? It's a big part of the problem. So I fully agree with Brian on that piece. And I mentioned operations. Okay, a bit of a plug. I can't resist just a little bit, although I didn't put any logos up there. But I do feel that while it's important to have many moving pieces and to adopt with the industry and to move fast, the area in the NFV called MANO, Management and Orchestration, is the glue that puts everything together. You're going to have different vendors in the data centers. You're going to have different flavors of OpenStack and Cloud Stack. You're going to have, hopefully, best-of-breed choices for the virtual network functions. But you have to manage those together so you can have one operational model to understand when things are wrong, what are they, so you can really leverage all of your technical resources together, so you can load balance between them, so you can take action if one fails, and you can also do the important things like security groups and affinity and anti-affinity groups for the applications themselves to make them work effectively in the network. So glad to see the work there. We're trying to do as much as we can to contribute to that working group in a very open way. Some of you that are involved there might know Michael Brenner pretty well, and other people contributing from our team to that activity. Finally, openness. So we announced in the previous NFV meeting that was in Bonn, the creation of our ecosystem. It's a true ecosystem. Okay? What we did there is we provided an NFV lab for the industry that's distributed. It has all the principles I discussed before, and we opened it up to anyone to use. And we have some of our largest and fiercest competitors signing up to do that. We're happy to have them there, because guess what? We learned from that what we need to improve in the management system. Okay, and we had Intel and HP and Citrix and Red Hat join as well to see from our learnings what we need to improve in the technology that underpins it. And then so far we had Deutsche Telekom and Telefonica join us to look at those use cases and say, okay, if these are the partners you have, why don't you try this use case and tell us what happens? Why don't you try combining a firewall, a load balancer, a DNS, and a CDN application and run this use case? So that's been pretty fruitful. It's been up and running for, when was the last conference? It was in August, I think. So we're 2 months. We have 15 partners. And if any of you are a vendor, you're welcome to join. Even if you fear us and you think we're competitors, we'll give you full access. We don't charge a dime for it. We think you'll learn from it. I'm sure we'll learn from it. Okay? And if you're an operator and you want to guide the industry a little bit, you're welcome. And then finally, just in conclusion, so if there's one goal apart from the obvious that we'd like to do is make sure that we move people to the executing phase as fast as possible. So far, we find that the best way of doing that is just through very, very tight work with a few service providers that are super serious and are willing to whiteboard with us. I mean, we've done a lot of work. We've been doing this for 3 years, a lot before NFV was created, but we keep on learning all the time. And I think these type of deep workshops of looking at the next challenges, doing quick prototyping, testing it, usually throwing it away, and then doing it again is the best way for us to advance, together with the ecosystem to make sure that there's an app store. Once there's a good app store for NFV that can really run any virtual network function, can run on any orchestration system, sure, we have our tricks that are better than the others. Sure, I'm sure our competitors have their tricks that are better from the others. But unless we get a good app store and interoperability basically with lots of different orchestration systems and are able to plug in any hardware, etc., we're not far away from that. A year from now, if we do our job right, a year from now, this will be like an obvious, of course. We're starting that. We started 2 months ago. I think we're close when I judge the momentum. So, yeah, that's about it. I think I have 2 minutes left, so if there's... Can I do questions, or should we do them on the panel? Oh, this is the open environment, by the way, that anybody can
Let's have a question for Dor, and then we'll proceed with the panel where Dor is also participating.
So I see the value for operators, of course, with network virtualization and how we can save money and less equipment. But what is the business case for vendors like yourself that build routers and access equipment? We're going to be buying less hardware. So how are you guys going to make money in this?
So a few things. First of all, as a philosophy, if there's a fundamental reason for change to happen, there are two options that can happen. You can lead the change, okay, and capture the new market, or you can have somebody change the industry for you, okay, and then you'll be like Nokia, right, or like Kodak, or like, pick your name. I don't, it's a public forum. This is being recorded, so I won't say any more names, okay? So that's fundamentally. Second thing is, I'll share with you a dirty little secret. In most cases, we don't make money from the hardware. Actually, if you look at the balance sheet of companies like us and like Ericsson and like others, our margins aren't great because we're bound to hardware. They could be much better. In software, our margins are north of 80%. Okay? So yes, maybe the top line will go down, but you know what? I'd rather have the top line go down and be ultra profitable, right? Third piece on that, and that's a big change we've made in Alcatel-Lucent. You might have seen our CEO, our new CEO, Michel Combs, talk about that. We decided fundamentally to make a shift from being a generalist that does everything everybody needs to do to being a specialist in a few areas. And what that means is we will gladly compete on each one of the layers as a best of breed. So we hope to have the best of breed SDN, the best of breed cloud orchestration platform, and the best of breed VNFs. And if we do our job right, we'll be selected in each of the layers more time than we lose for merit. And not because these things are pre-integrated and they work together with each other, and if you plug in something else, it will break. So we're focusing on areas where we think we can be the best in the world at and want to win as a pure best of breed decision.